Hi class, my name is Danae Hall. Today is December 5th, 2017, and I'm going to be going over the digestive system a little bit. I just ate a cheeseburger, and I'm going to go through how that gets digested and where it gets digested within the digestive tract. There's two main parts of the digestive tract. So there's the alimentary canal and the accessory structures. So the alimentary canal consists mainly of the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and the anus. And the accessory structures, there's the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, and then also like the teeth and the tongue. So when I get to the accessory structures, then I will point those out. So first, the burger enters my mouth, and this is what we call ingestion. It's when the food is just coming into the body. So in the mouth, it gets chewed. So that includes about three accessory organs or accessory structures. And that would be the teeth, the tongue, and the salivary glands. Okay, so as the food is getting chewed, the salivary glands are starting to secrete more saliva to make sure that the food is kind of wet enough to be able to go down the alimentary canal. And the saliva starts to kind of break down some of the carbohydrates. So that's going to be some of the complex carbs in the lettuce and tomatoes, the carbs in the cheese, and the bread as well. So that's where that's going to start getting digested, is right in the mouth. And then the food gets kind of balled up into just one little piece before you swallow it, and that's called the bolus, and it all goes down the digestive tract together, one little bolus. So after it leaves the mouth, it gets swallowed, and it goes to the pharynx. The pharynx is the first part of the digestive tract that is involuntary, so you can't control what goes on from the pharynx pretty much all the way down. So the pharynx includes a little flap called the epiglottis, and the epiglottis, when it senses that there's food in the pharynx, it'll close, so it'll close off the trachea so that no food goes down the windpipe, so to say, but instead it goes down the esophagus, which is where the food is obviously supposed to go. So once in the esophagus is going to be secreting mucosa, which kind of helps to start digesting some of the food, and then also helps the bolus to be wet enough to be able to come down the esophagus. Also in the esophagus, we see basically waves of kind of the muscles kind of contracting and relaxing in waves. And so this is called paralysis, and it basically just helps the food to kind of come down into the stomach area. At the bottom of the esophagus also we see valves, so they open and close to let the bolus through, and that's basically so that even if you were like upside down or something, the food still wouldn't be coming up your esophagus, it would be going down, because the paralysis, all the muscles are making the food go down, and then also the valves are opening and closing to not allow the food back up into the area that it's already been in. So the next part there is the stomach. So once the food reaches the stomach, it mixes for a really long time. It's usually in the stomach for like 4+ hours, 4 hours at the least. And so it gets mixed with gastric juice and lots of hormones and enzymes, and this turns your food into chyme. So chyme is the name for the food now. You can't necessarily really call it food because it's been digested a lot. And by the way, when I say digestion, I mean that it's being broken down into its chemical building blocks. So like proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, carbohydrates. It's being broken down into those very simple pieces. and that's happening all the way from the mouth into the small intestine. So that happens for a while. So the main part that's happening in the stomach is the protein digestion. So a lot of the protein is getting digested and broken down there. So that's where a lot of the meat is going to be digested or broken down into just protein molecules. So the next step is the small intestine. This is the longest part of the alimentary canal. It can be like around like 30 feet. It's really, really long, and the food is in the small intestine for a really long time. The longest amount of time that it spends in the alimentary canal, it spends in the small intestine. So the small intestine is where a lot of the digestion happens, and a lot of the nutrients are taken out of the food and given to the bloodstream or into the lymphatic ducts. So that's where a lot of the nutrients is taken out. This is also where segmentation happens. So segmentation is where the chyme or the food is kind of mixed around, going back and forth basically. So the muscles in the esophagus, like we said earlier, peristalsis, will kind of move in waves to get the food down. In the small intestine, it's different. They kind of move back and forth in order for the food to kind of get mixed up and for all of the food to touch the walls of the small intestines at some point, if not a lot of points, so that it can take out all the nutrients as possible. So in the small intestine also is where a lot of the lipid digestion happens. So lipids is going to be mostly like in the cheese, there will be a lot of lipids. And then a lot of the nucleic acids will be digested as well. That's like in the meat, there's a lot of nucleic acids. So that's where a lot of those two things are going to be taken out, is in the small intestine. And this happens with the help of the pancreatic juice and the bile. So this kind of includes some of the accessory structures we talked about earlier. So the liver actually makes the bile, and it stores it in the gallbladder. And so if the digestive system doesn't necessarily need bile at the moment, then it'll store it in the gallbladder so that we have some when we do need it later. And when we do need it, like when we eat meat, then through some small ducts, the gallbladder will give it to the small intestine, and then it will be there to kind of help digest some of the lipids in the small intestine. The pancreatic juice also is very acidic and can digest carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. It can digest them all because it's so acidic. So that happens in the small intestine. And then we move into the large intestine. So the first part of the large intestine is called the cecum, and this is where it starts to finish the absorption of nutrients and water. And then in the large intestines, they're split into three main parts. So we have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon. And this is where the food is reduced to its chemical building blocks, and then all of the water is taken out. All of the water that isn't needed for it to actually just come out of your body, all of the rest of it is taken out in the large intestine. And then the next part is the anus. And so the large intestine delivers the food, or the undigested food, whatever could not be digested by the small intestine, so which is just going to be very little, is passed on to the anus. And so there's two sphincters, and these are basically rings of muscle. And so they can just kind of squeeze. So there's two sphincters. One of them is smooth muscle, so it is involuntary. So it will kind of try and get the food out regardless of whether you're ready. And then the next one is a skeletal muscle, and so you can control this one. And so this is basically you are able to try and control when your feces are coming out of your body. And then also there's kind of that gut feeling that you need to get it out regardless of whether or not you're ready. And that is the smooth muscle sphincter working because it's ready before you are. So yeah, once the anal canal is full, then the feces will come out of your body, and that is called defecation. And that is the end of the digestive process.